ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the International Mandela Effect Conference 2024. We have a couple interesting speakers for this evening, and I say interesting because they won't be in the room with us this evening. They will be coming in with this big, beautiful screen we have right here, so they'll be with us, sort of. But we're glad to have all of these speakers here. We're glad to have all of you guys here, of course. I keep saying it, but it's true. It's absolutely true. The conversations I've been having and meeting you guys has been absolutely amazing, and that's one of the best parts of these conferences. I know we say it in the open tables, and I know a lot of people here now have told me directly that the moments in between, the moments when you have time to, like a lunch break or things like that, those are the moments that really mean the most. You really get to know people and converse with people of like minds and that understand who you are and what you mean, right? So that is absolutely my favorite part of it too. I'm not gonna lie. I love doing this, but when I'm out here able to talk to all of you guys and hang out with you guys, that is my favorite part too. But ladies and gentlemen, we've got a great speaker coming up next. A very, very smart man, and I know a couple of you guys heard me say it earlier. This is the one presentation. I know I shouldn't play favorites. This is the one I've been looking forward to, and you'll understand why in a second. For those of you guys who know who I am, you'll really understand why this excites me. Dr. Charles Lobaito, congratulations, Charles.
Thank you.
Presentation, Emotional Dynamics of Memory Recall Pertaining to the Mandela Effect, shares the findings from his dissertation research at Grand Canyon University. This qualitative descriptive study explores how individuals emotionally respond and cope with alternate memories associated with the Mandela Effect. Dr. Lobaito recruited 59 participants through the Amazon Mechanical Turk platform, specifically targeting master workers. He selected 10 individuals for his pool for in-depth Zoom interviews to examine their emotional and physical reactions to memory discrepancies. Cognitive assessments were also conducted to analyze participants' memory accuracy and understanding of their inconsistencies they encountered. The study revealed a range of emotional responses, including surprise, confusion, and amusement, alongside various coping mechanisms participants used to reconcile conflicting memories with known reality. These findings illuminate the complexities of memory recall, showing how emotional and psychological factors shape how individuals process such experiences. Dr. Lobaito's work contributes to broader discussions of the nature of memory, perception, and emotional resilience by examining the Mandela Effect through memory. His presentation will dive into these emotional dynamics and their implications within psychology, offering a fresh perspective on how memories and alternate realities affect individual cognition. Dr. Charles Lobaito recently graduated from Grand Canyon University, where he earned his Ph.D. in psychology with the information you guys are about to hear right now. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Charles Lobaito.
Thanks, guys. Good afternoon. How's everyone doing today? Doing well? All right, let me begin. Greetings. I'm truly honored to be here today. I'd like to thank IMEC and team for inviting me to speak. And the title of my presentation is, like you said, Emotional Dynamics of Memory Recall Pertaining to the Mandela Effect. In this talk, I will share the findings from my recent dissertation study. My goal today is to dive into these emotional dynamics. All right, moving on, I could tell you a little bit about who I am, and I'll give you my introduction. I wear a few hats. First and foremost, I'm a researcher, a writer, and business manager with a deep-rooted passion for exploring the complexities of human memory procession, where I specialize in understanding how memory functions, particularly in the fascinating phenomenon we know as the Mandela Effect. My research journey into the Mandela Effect has been a significant undertaking, spanning 5 years of dedicated study, as Jerry mentioned, at Grand Canyon University. So, on a personal note, I was born on the East Coast from New Jersey,
and I'm currently living in Oklahoma, where I call my home. I'm a Gen Xer, so as Gen Xers, we bring a lifelong curiosity and a drive to understand complex phenomena. I'm excited to share with you today what my research has uncovered about the Mandela Effect. Thank you all for having me here, and I look forward to this journey. Next, let's talk a little bit about the study background, shall we? Current and existing research on the Mandela Effect has mainly concentrated on its origins, specific examples, conspiracy theories, visual memory, esoteric musings and quantum possibilities, along with other great avenues. However, there is a gap in the research about the phenomenon's emotional and psychological implications. So the overall goal was to elevate the Mandela Effect within the realm of university-level scholarship and to study people's feelings and emotions. So how do people feel about it when they experience this effect? And this is what we're going to find out. Next is the introduction to the study. The purpose of this study was to explore how United States college-educated citizens of 21 to 65 described their emotional response and coping approach to alternative memory experiences relating to the Mandela Effect. This cohort was selected by the committee team, GCU, to collect rich emotional and cognitive data and to address any ethical concerns as per IRB approval. Dr. Taryn Huff was my committee chair. He's a GCU graduate and an expert on performance psychology. Dr. James Smith was the methodologist. He has various academic publications in general psychology. And Dr. Aaron French was my content expert. He published one of the first academic papers on the Mandela Effect. And this was a dream team, and I was blessed to serve under their leadership. Next, let's talk about the research method and design. The research method for this study was qualitative. Qualitative research aims to gain insights through a humanistic or idealistic perspective. This method seeks to comprehend people's beliefs, experiences, attitudes, behaviors, and interactions. And the design was descriptive. So what this descriptive design did was it provided a detailed, straightforward account of events experienced by an individual or groups. This approach was employed to investigate specific phenomena. So this method involved data collecting, often through interviews, observations, and textual analysis. And the reason why this was the best use for this study is because it focused on participants' general thoughts, feelings, and accounts. So the data was collected through surveys and interviews. When little is known about a subject, an overall descriptive approach is best. Little was known about the emotional angle to this phenomenon, so a description was needed for a better understanding. Next, we can move on into the theoretical framework. The theoretical framework that was used for this study was cognitive, motivational, and relational theory of emotion. This is known as CMR. This is a theory that was developed by American psychologist Richard Lazarus. What this theory does is explain how emotions are generated and experienced on an individual's cognitive appraisal of a situation, emotional states, and relational contexts. So what this theory does is it proposes how emotions can result from the interplay between how we assess the significance of an event, goals and desires, and the social and cultural context of an event, which they experience. So the CMR framework was justified because it provided an approach to better understand memory recall by integrating cognitive, emotional, and relational perspectives. So these perspectives are essential for exploring this complex nature of the Mandela Effect. And also, I believe it offered a holistic understanding of how individuals process and cope with alternative memory recalls. Now we could go, if you like, into the phenomenon. Now, all of us here know about the Mandela Effect for the most part. Those out there in the internet world or who are new to this subject matter, here's a brief definition. It's a phenomenon that unites a large group of people in a shared memory that differs from reality. This is a testament to the collective nature of human cognition. It's named after Nelson Mandela, who many remember as having died in prison in the 1980s, and truly did not and became the president of South Africa. There are many great researchers and writers who have eloquently stated this. And let's carry on, shall we? Next, we'll go into the research questions. So basically, there's an overarching research question, which was, how did this cohort describe their emotional response and coping approach to alternative memory experiences? Like, how do people feel when they, feel this? Is there cognitive dissonance? Are they happy, sad, confused? Let's get it down into a study. So, from this, of all three research questions, so the first one, how do people assess their situation? Like, how do they perceive it? Number two, what is their emotional reaction? How do they feel after knowing that they experienced this effect? And number three, once they've seen it, now they feel it, how do people cope with it? How do they cope with this emotional reaction? So next we can move on to the population sample. As we already talked about, as in the introduction, there were 59 participants, master workers through Amazon Intern. And so the data collection was a demographic questionnaire, and it was administered to all the participants. And the last question is, after they completed the survey, if they'd like to do an interview, to check off yes. And then that's when I contacted them to do the Zoom call interview. It's important to note that convenience sampling was used for the survey participants, and purposive sampling was used for the interviews. Next, we could dive deeper into our recruitment methods. As we said, they were set up with Interc, and the interview was set up through an email, and they were sent to their participant. And no minors or protected classes were included, and the study compiled participant confidentiality. And so with this, it involved minimal risk. Participants were knowledgeable, proficient, and they had a proven track record for working in ethical studies. So they filled out the survey for participation and consent, and everything was good to go. And next, we can move on to the data sources. And like I said, there were three of them. So their data source number one was the demographic questionnaire. Next was the Mandela Effect survey, which was 13 questions. And then I did the audio Zoom interviews, which are about 45 to 50 minutes in length. And after that, they were transcribed. Next slide, we can go further into the data instruments. And this way, a little bit more about it. So the basic demographic data was, based on, race, religion, male, female, things of that nature. So this way, location. This way we get a good sample of the whole United States population. Instrument number two was the survey, and it was 13 questions. And these were in line with the Mandela Effect. It asked them about the curious George have a tail or not. The Monopoly man, did he wear a monocle? Did he not? How did they feel about the Mandela Effect? And it was a multiple choice sample. And then number three, those who wanted to participate, we did the online interview where I gathered a little bit more detail on their emotional responses and coping mechanisms. Okay, so now let's move on. And next is the data collection procedures. So before starting the process, I had to get all the necessary approvals obtained from Residing University. They were obtained from the dissertation committee, the chair, methodologist, content expert, and the IRB department. So the study synopsis, the procedures were shared on ECTURF, and participant consent was obtained. Interested participants agreed, and they filled out all the necessary forms. So it was really fun. It was really great. Had a lot of good feedback. So next we can move on to the analysis procedures if you want. So basically, step one was we compiled and cleaned the data. So all the demographic questionnaire data was collected and processed through a Microsoft Excel, through a spreadsheet and report. And the interviews were all recorded on Zoom. And they were transcribed using Microsoft Office 365. And the data was cleaned through Microsoft Word, for misspellings and any kind of errors. And not only that, they were given to the participants to ensure the accuracy, and they emailed you back saying everything was okay and yep and up. So this way there was no discrepancies in representation of voice. And the second analysis was descriptive statistics. And this is like where it's U.S. citizenship, gender, age, ethnicity, religion, location, of what we talked about. And then codes came up for the surveys. So certain words and phrases associated with the research questions popped out. And so they were highlighted, and then they were grouping categories of reckoning. And we had a large volume of data. This is with the direct insert information, plus it answers a coding. And so this is where we began the process. Moving on. For a qualitative descriptive study, we used something called reflexive thematic analysis. And this was actually created by researchers Braun and Clark. When you're doing a academic study like this for introduce, this actually helps with alignment. And so these are the 6 steps that we took with the transcripts. So we have to familiarize the data, have we read it multiple times, jot ideas of what this can mean, what that can mean, piece the information. We had the general rote words and codes that popped up systematically across sets. So we created some themes based on the groupings of words, in defining the labels, and then we produced a report. And the reflexivity protocol was used, so this way I have no personal biases and I maintained objectivity throughout the analysis. So basically what that means is just me being aware of my thought processes and to make sure that I don't add any bias to the data. Okay, next, if you want, you can move on. And here's an example of an analysis. And in this study, I employ Myra.com. It's a collaborative online whiteboard platform to facilitate the effective thematic analysis. Oh, by the way, guys, this is a really great tool. If you've ever been to some studies, it really helps out. Because what it did is enable me to visually organize and analyze the qualitative data collected from interviews with participants. It let me categorize participant responses into the cognitive, motivational, and relational themes. This method allowed for comprehensive understanding of how participants experience false memory or alternative memory recall, enhancing the depth and clarity of the thematic analysis. And so here's a brief picture of showing an example of how I grouped everything and the data that was given in subsets. And if you want to move on to the next one, I also have another example of development of the research questions. And same thing, I collected the codes based on all interview transcripts, and the results are presented in the interview findings. Okay, next we can move on to the coding part. So we're coding the transcripts. The words and phrases from the interviewees were highlighted in yellow. Transcript coding was conducted as part of the analysis. On the left, you can see a highlighted segment of the transcript where participants discuss their memories. Each highlighted portion corresponds to a specific theme or concept identified during the analysis. And on the right, these themes are coded and labeled to categorize the content systematically. So what this does is this allowed for another understanding of underlying patterns in the data. Like that's what we're looking for, patterns, so we can come up with these themes. Like how do people feel? What are they coping? So this really helped out to understand people's feelings related to the Mandela effect. So now let's dig into the results, shall we? This is the part, right? So now here we are. So basically, there were 62 initial participants, but it turns out we had to reject 3. So what happened was one respondent didn't specify other as required by IRB under gender, and the other, they weren't U.S. citizens, 2 of them. So that's how we got to the 59 total. And that satisfied the survey. And out of those 59, we did have 10. So basically for the survey, the gender distribution was fairly balanced. We had 31 males, 22 females, and 1 binary. The majority of respondents fell within the 30 to 39 age group with 22 participants. Least was a 21 to 29 with 2 participants. But all in all, the average mean of all survey participants was about 43 years old. So I think that reflected a comprehensive age range for the study. Moving on to the next slide for our results. A majority of the respondents identified as white Caucasian, falling into this category of 47. The remaining participants were evenly distributed among African American, Asian Pacific Islander, and Hispanic ethnicities, with 4 individuals in each age group. In terms of marital status, most participants were single, totaling 31. 22 were married, and 6 of them were divorced. As for religious affiliation, the largest group consisted of participants who identified as Christian, which was 15. Close behind that were no religion affiliated with 13, and Roman Catholic 7, Baptist 4, and the least were shared with Judaism, Buddhism, and such. So this really gave like a diverse group of religious practices. Next, we could move on and look at the participants' educational backgrounds. So basically, a majority of the participants held a bachelor's degree, were 33 individuals. This was followed by 16 participants with an associate's degree, 7 with a master's, and 3 with a Ph.D. In terms of regional representation, the Southeast region was the most represented with 22 participants. The next was the Midwest, followed with 14, the West with 12, and then the Northeast with 6, and eventually, finally, the Southwest with 4 participants. So pretty much a broad group, throughout the country. This is really satisfying. Next, we could dig more into the survey findings. So now we already talked about the demographics. Now we'll go into the answers. So what the Mandela Effect survey did was address the cognitive assessments, emotional reactions, and trend issues. So the majority of review were most respondents identified with their false or alternative memories with errors influenced by external factors. Additionally, introspection was used among participants, often engaging in skepticism and curiosity, critically assessing their memory inaccuracies. So if we flip to the next slide, I could show you a graph showcasing these results. So I do want to note that some participants were not certain about their assessments, including the nuanced nature of recognizing and interpreting alternative memories. But a lot of people they actually wanted to motivate to learn more, and I thought that was an interesting discovery. Pretty pretty wild, really fascinating stuff. If we move on to the next slide, I could share with you some more results for question number 2. So now, how did these participants describe their feelings? Well, the number 1 was surprise. So the number 1 most common reaction was surprise. This is 20 participants. That they couldn't believe their mind. They're like, what? I kind of swore, the Monopoly man, had a monocle, and now he doesn't. And a lot of participants were surprising, with their number 1 reaction. Followed by a close second was confusion. So this was by 19 participants, and they reflected cognitive dissonance. And then coming in next were other emotions, including amusement. So 4 people, they thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. The reviews, they actually thought it was kind of wild. 2 people had gratitude and grateful for discovering this and learning maybe this the whole effect. And 2 participants were anxious and had anxiety about it, kind of worried, wow, what does this mean? So 6 participants on the survey said they didn't really experience any alternate memory recall, and 4 said they were uncertain. They really didn't want to give a solid answer, so they that was one of the options if they were unsure. Okay, let's move on next, shall we? To the results here. So basically, this breaks it down, and it showcases what we just discussed right here, and really fascinating. Okay, shall we move on? So now next what we want to do is, let's talk about the research question 3 and how everyone copes about this in the findings. So 15 participants used introspection as a primary coping mechanism. So they reflected inward and they wanted to know what it means to have this feeling and having experienced the Mandela effect. They dug deeper into themselves, and they wanted to know what it mean. They got very philosophical. 13 participants, which number 2, they researched the topic to understand their feelings. So they're these participants, they wow, it's really cool. Let me go Google it, or legal research it, YouTube videos. And then they started doing research as a way to cope and to understand what they just felt and about the whole subject matter in general. This is interesting. 12 participants sought input from their friends and family. So they talked to their spouse, their brother, sister, husbands, wives, parents, children, a couple of instances. And so they wanted to know what their thoughts and feelings on it. So there was actually a social dynamic with it as well. And then 10 participants just dismissed it as a human error, saying, oh, you know what, it's just, regular error, no big deal. I misremembered it, and that's how it is. So those are results for that. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about next. Oh, this is the results, by the way. This is just a pie chart showing the percentages of the results. Okay, next we can move on, shall we? Let's talk about some notable trends. So for the survey results, the number 1 thing that people remember and talked about, was the Fruit of the Loom logo. 42 participants remembered a cornucopia in the logo, and 12 did not. For the Monopoly Man, 36 participants believed the Monopoly Man had a monocle, while 20 did not. And Curious George, 29 participants believed that he had a tail, while 18 did not. Next, let's talk about the interview demographics. And so this is the third part of the study. So this group occupied various backgrounds. For the gender category, 7 were female and 3 were male. Ethnically, 8 were white Caucasian, with 1 African American and 1 Asian Pacific Islander. Regarding marital status, there were 6 single participants, 2 were married, and 2 divorced. Their religious affiliations were broad-ranging, with the largest group being Christian, 2, followed by Roman Catholic 2, and others identifying as Baptist, Gnosticism, Protestant, just a regular Catholic and atheist. Educational backgrounds range from associate's degrees 3, bachelor degrees 4, master's degree 1, and Ph.D.s 2. And the participants' ages range from 40 to 64. And what this did was provide a mature and experienced cohort for the study. So here, the average age of the participants was 50.4 years. And what this did, I feel, is reflect a mature group likely to have diverse life experiences. Okay, moving on, let's talk about the results now from the introduce. So, again, as we talked about earlier, the research method was Braun and Clark's reflective thematic analysis. So out of all the findings through all the data with the transcripts, there were 9 themes discovered in total. And this is what frequent each research question. And there were a total of 42 codes identified. So for RQ1, the themes that were found were cognitive appraisal, the evaluation of accuracy, and cognitive dissonance. Now, all participants were given a coded names, pseudonyms to protect their identity. So for interview participant number 9, called Nova, she stated, there's a specific term, and it's like deja vu. She said this when discussing her alternative memory recall, alluding to her experience of cognitive dissonance. Moving on to the next slide, for research question number 2 for emotional reactions, the themes that were found in the interviews were emotional response, intensity of emotional reaction, and they were motivated by their emotions. To quote interview participant number 6, Dakota, she stated, the biggest emotion you get is surprise. And this was the consensus shared by participants throughout the interview process. Next, we move on to the research question 3 findings. The themes found were coping mechanisms, communication patterns, and existential reflection. So an example of coping mechanisms such as faith-based coping, when interviewing number 1, Ariana, she stated she innately finds comfort in God and relies on Him when dealing with alternative memory recall. So next, let's go with the results and look at the code book. So this chart here illustrates some cognitive examples, and their cognitive aspects like information discrepancy awareness and memory construction were the most frequently observed, highlighting the emphasis on understanding how people perceive and interpret conflicting information. In terms of motivation, the interest and curiosity captured by the intrigued by phenomenon code suggests that motivation significantly drives engagement with memories and experiences. Additionally, the study uncovered a relational impact. The codes for cultural factors and social influence emphasize the substantial role in social cultural contexts play in shaping memory and perception. So, in other words, there was a big social cultural factor, and it was pretty fascinating, really. But the number one code was, like I said, information discrepancy awareness. Like, they were aware of it, and then it was just fascinating how they talked about like their family and friends and how they discussed it, and they wanted to see more clarification through those coping mechanisms. Now moving on, we could go with the interview findings of topics most mentioned. Now here, this is really fascinating, and this is the fun part of the study, because we get to know which Mandela effects were like the most frequently mentioned and most popular. And it's really big to get this concrete on record. So the Mandela effect topics that were most mentioned were Nelson Mandela's passing in the 1980s, sources 2013, noted, the monopoly man having a monocle, and the misspelling of the Berenstain Bears. And additionally, the absence of the cornucopia and the foot of the loom logo came up again, as it did in the research questions for the survey, same thing popped up again here from the interviews. So these findings highlight this cultural phenomenon's enduring impact on individuals' memories and beliefs. And now next we can move on, if you want to the issues most important to the participants. So basically, evaluating their cast recollections was recorded to them, and sharing their experience with their family. So that was the most important in how they cope with their alternative memory recall. And so what social actions did to do is it reinforces or challenges your individual memories. And it is very fascinating. And not only in person, but also online through their social media. A couple participants noted that as well. And also the community to truly introspect shit. A lot of people were determined they wanted to know the truth. It's like, why is this happening? And that is a $55,000 question, right, guys? So, that was really fascinating. So what this did was it reflected intellectual curiosity and personal introspection. So let's move on to the next slide, shall we? So now this is the issues most important to participants. So basically, we talked about that. So, they're really fascinated, and, it really gave a diverse category of, like, what people felt and what they meant. So these are really important to them. They share in what they were saying. All right, let's move on, shall we? All right, this is cool. Now let's talk about unexpected findings. So this study uncovers several surprising insights that were not initially anticipated. So one, experienced astral dynamics projection. So a phenomenon where consciousness or the soul is believed to travel beyond the physical realm and will things into reality. This unexpected finding suggests a potential link between out-of-body experiences and alternative memory distortions. Mina, an interview participant, discussed how belief systems and subjective experiences might shape perceptions of reality, hinting there's a unique relationship between memory and spirituality. Lucius, another one of the participants, described instances where he received time as nonlinear, experiencing discrepancies in the passage of time. This insight opens new avenues for exploring how altered states of consciousness might impact memory recall. Next, we could move on to versions of other Mandela effects. These might be new, they might not, but these came up in the study that I personally witnessed myself. Mina recalled the 1980 show Punky Brewster differently, believing Punky Brewster was adopted by a loving family. Upon rewatching, she discovered the character was an older man, a building manager, and a neighbor who adopted Punky Brewster, and this challenged her nostalgic perception. And then Dakota, another one of our participants, she remembers the Target logo have multiple rings, not just one bullseye with one ring. So this example underscores how easy visual details can be misremembered. Okay, so now, next, moving on, what are the theoretical implications? Well, one is extend CMR theory by applying it to the phenomenon of false or alternative memory recall, demonstrating how cognitive appraisal, motivation, and relational dynamics influence emotional responses in this specific context. So this way, the findings of the study affirm the CRE model. Okay, moving on. We can talk about some practical implications. This study opens doors for developing a program, many lesson plans designed to sharpen students' ability to critically assess the accuracy of their hairprints. This could foster critical thinking. With psychology classes, educators can guide learners in understanding the complexities of cognition and memory. And not only that, but number two, movement media and publication. These findings often, this can offer an opportunity to connect with broader audiences, where we can continue to spark discussions across platforms. And this way we can contribute and grow the Mandela Effect for awareness. Okay, we're almost back here. Moving on, we'll talk about the strengths really quick. So, of course, one of the strengths was using Amazon Enter Master Workers. What this is, and a layer of reliability and openness for the study. Their familiarity with research protocols and commitment to contributing truthfully strengthen the validity and richness of the data collected. There was rich data saturation to the analysis, which produced specific insights, and it contributed to the body of knowledge within the Mandela Effect phenomenon and the emotional dynamics of memory recall too. Now let's talk about some of the limitations and weaknesses. As with any study, this study relied on self-reported data. So this could introduce biases such as social desirability, want to produce the right answer to look more favorable or accessible, and participant authenticity. Sampling target was another one, so it focused on Hepturk's platform, which may limit the generalizability of the findings. They include the growing general population, other countries, things of that nature. And also, it capture the full complexity of the social phenomenon under investigation. We still don't know why the phenomenon exists. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about recommendations for future research. I feel that studies that track the long-term effects of alternative memory recall could be advantageous. See if changes in behavior occur. Also, the role of individual differences. Like, how do personality traits affect how people feel and cope with alternative memory effects? So someone could do a study further, and maybe, the Nick Breyer's SWIB, we could find out the personalities and see if that has any influence on how people feel. I recommend researchers to explore these avenues. Technology is another possible avenue we could go under. How do technologies like virtual reality and artificial intelligence, like generated AI, affect memory processes? And how could this impact the Mandela Effect? Will it help Kirk Ender? Something to think about. And the last, I recommend other Mandela Effect researchers to conduct a global perspective and use the general population. There's more research to be done. And with that, I conclude today's presentation. Thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Charles Lobaito! That was definitely a lot of information, Charles, and I like the way you laid it out. Very well done, my friend. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say I very much enjoyed that.
Did you find any correlation between demographics and how many times they experience the Mandela Effect? The quantity of Mandela Effect experiences? I mean, were older people more likely now, younger people?
Well, that's a great question. So basically what I found is basically there was no distinct differences between demographic populations. So for example, whether somebody lived in like New Jersey or California, if they were male or female, religion or it seems like they all experience this feeling of the Mandela effect, and it appeared from this initial study that there were no distinct differences.
I would be interested to know if the emotional response people had to the Mandela Effect affected how often they got it as well. That would be, to me, interesting. If people were afraid, did they experience it less often? If they loved it, did they experience it more often? To me, it would also be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting. But usually the participants who had them Mandela effect, they had several of them. Like they A lot of the participants did know what the Mandela effect is, and they had alternate highs. So what I found out is it's fascinating that they had multiple ones from the Star Wars ones to the slogans, uh, Bible quotes, and there were actually all kinds of Mandela effects they were experiencing. It seems like there was many of them, not just one or two.
Yeah,
With very fascinating.
really fascinating. Thank you. Thank you.
That's a great question, Jerry. Thanks for asking that. For me, when one of the participants were talking about the passage like time and how time can go forwards and backwards, and they brought in like a quantum element, and even though it's like a psychology research with emotions, he brought in this angle, and it was very fascinating. And I didn't really know what to make of it, and I was like, "Wow, this is very interesting." So when I was talking to him about it, he thinks time can go forward and backward. Now you get into quantum mechanics and like, what is time, and, he talked a little bit about simulator, realities and universes. So, which was interesting is like, so now what is a simulated reality? Um, so, is it like, a great architect, like some kind of like, you know, a god or some kind of great spiritual being? Like, is it a computer? Is it a biologics? And it was really fascinating about time. Can time go forward and backward? We don't really know. But I think for me, that was really mind blowing. I was like, wow.
I think that's actually a debate that is still being had in physics, so I'm not sure they've come to a full conclusion on that at this time. We have another question. Come on up to the mic here, but
Question. As far as the coding, did you guys use a standard format for the coding? As a matter of fact, went through a protocol, a book that had the coding in it, or did you guys subjectively make up your coding and apply it?
Great question. Yes. So basically, for the coding, we subjectively did make up the coding based on other individuals. So, like for example, reading the transcript, someone says, I was surprised that the amount. So we highlighted surprise. The next transcript is like, I was surprised about this. Surprised. So then what we did was we coded those brackets. So okay, 4 or 5 participants said they were surprised. 2 or 3, said that, they find faith in God, or that's how they cope with this discrepancy and things of that nature. So basically, the coding actually was bracketing, and it kind of fell in line with what other people were saying. So to get a general, like data. So that's how we coded it with my methodologist and I, and that's how we came up with the themes. So that's a really great question, and it's really fascinating. It's the more data you have, the more codes you could have come up with. For me personally, like I'd like to see some more emotions, because no one said that they loved that this was happening, or they got joy. So those specific emotions didn't show up. But I wonder if like some other studies were done, or any other emotions, and like pride was another one. They were mostly like surprise, confusion, things of that nature, anxiety. But yeah, really fascinating stuff. So there's definitely more work to be done. And I just want to note that it was accepted by ProQuest. So in about 2 to 4 weeks, it'll be coming out. It'll have a DOI and everything. And I'll be happy, to share my work with you guys through email or any kind of communications as well.
being published is huge. Go ahead. One more, Eric. You was like,
Yeah, I'm curious as to your actual personal position on the Mandela effect. Have you experienced it? What's your take on it?
well,
What's your
now,
thoughts?
now, before you answer that, remember he will be in the panel tonight too. If you want to hold that question.
Okay.
Oh, I'll tell you all about it, my friend. I'll tell you. Oh my goodness, we're all here. We're all, that's why we're here. But I mean, I'll tell you, it's a fascinating thing. I'll tell you, it really does make you, question yourself and the reality, and it's it's wild. It's a beautiful thing. I'm glad that we have it because it sparks great curiosity and debate, But I do have some theories I'll be happy to share later. Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of personally excited to hear what those are myself. So make sure you answer that. You ask that question again in the roundtable later. We have another question here, bud. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Lobaito, thanks very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of us might have this question floating around in our heads, but I'll go ahead and ask it. I was just curious if you had any thoughts on the study done at the University of Chicago on visual Mandela effects some time ago, and if that had any impact on you at all.
Fascinating. Yes. That was actually, I cited that in my research as well for comparisons. For time constraints, I didn't add it into this presentation, but it was in my dissertation defense. Yeah, the Prasad and Bainbridge out of the University of Chicago, fascinating study. And, how the visual Mandela effect, like the VME, there was a correlation also that a lot of their participants also experienced like the Mandela effect for visuals, like, logos, the Pikachu one and things of that nature. So it's a great study you bring up. And that was actually one of the first studies done on the Mandela effect in an academic study. It was really great. And that really heavily inspired me to do this research as well. And that's why I actually reached out to Dr. Aaron French, who wound up, I was lucky to become the content expert. And he was the first one actually to write a paper about it in 2018 with the Mandela Effect and New Memory. And he brought up, that this is a really important topic because, it was, circulated online, YouTube videos, written books about it. But it hasn't been yet done in the academic field. And so the last few years, it's been getting in here. And even when I started in 2019 when I did at Grand Canyon University, I'm like, I'd like to do this study on the Mandela effect. And they're like, what? Well, it's this. Like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, well, why not? This is very important research and it's something I'm fascinated about. And it just so happens I was lucky around the same time the Prasad and Bainbridge study dropped, and I read their dissertation, went over it, and then they republished their study actually, which was great. And it got it's on Google Scholar, it's gotten a lot of reviews, and that's a really fascinating study. And yeah, that was a really good one. Thanks for bringing that up, and I'm gonna go read it again.
Thanks very much.
And we got another question coming up to the mic. Go ahead, sir.
What impacts do you have introductions into the study on residue? Are you familiar?
I'm sorry, repeat that? Sorry?
Are you familiar with the term residue? And I see that it's typed memory recall. So what residue has been introduced into the study? Meaning like sands of
memory recall.
pictures.
What introduced me? For me, I would say like 2016, 2017. I remember watching like Forrest Gump, and when he said, life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. I'm like, hey, time out. Wait, I thought it was life, is like a box of chocolates, And so, I'm like, what the heck? And then so I was just totally like dumbfounded. I'm like, wait a sec, this doesn't make any sense, And then I watched it again, and I'm like, what? I go on YouTube videos, and I'm like, this is really bizarre. And then when I was typing it in, it just showed up the Mandela Effect, and I didn't know what that was. So then I looked at the Mandela Effect, and then I did a whole bunch of YouTube videos and stuff, and I was just like, wow, this is like really amazing. And so for years, I was just fascinated about it. I'm like, well, you know what? Let me do a study about it. So so then that's when I did GCU, and then the first 2 years was just regular academic coursework, and then you start the second part of the program, which is conducting your study. And I even reached out to Fiona Broom, and I asked her, before I can conduct a study, what are your thoughts about it and about like the feelings and emotions beyond, with it. And I was just so lucky she happened to email me back, and we had email correspondence, which I was lucky. And she told me the whole backstory and of the whole thing with the green room. And it was really fascinating, and I just wanted to thank her for that as well, and you know, carry on this research, and to add whatever I can, philosophically or intellectually to it, and
Doctor.
we never stop learning.
So the question on the table now is residue. Do you know what residue is?
Oh, residue. Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard.
Not a problem.
Do
Was that introduced into the study at any point?
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I misheard. So with the residue, I did find some residue, and for example, for the JFK assassination, that was actually I wrote in my dissertation under chapter 2, which is the review literature. So in my original research, what I discovered was residue, such as the assassination of JFK, where there were supposed to be, if you watch the YouTube video, there's 6 passengers and there's 3 rows. But if you go to the JFK Museum, there's a replica of only 2. And also Time magazine, they published in 1963, the week of the assassination, they show a photo of the car with only 2 in it. And so that's some residual effects I found in my conducting the research. So there was that one, which was they really jumped out. And then there was other residue with the Great Pyramids. So like the Great Pyramid of Gaza and all that. There was a painter in the early 1900s, like Otto, where he's known for his famous paintings. And he painted the Great Pyramids. And he shows like the Great Pyramid, the biggest one, in the front, and then the other 2 to the side of it. But now if you look on Google Maps and if you look on like the internet now, the pyramids are all 3 diagonal, with the biggest one like in the front, and it was never that way. Something to that effect. So that was another residual evidence where alternative shifts in reality were present. So how one artist rendered it one way, and now it's another way. So those are just 2 great examples of residual evidence I found in my conducting the research. Thanks for answering that question.
Is that answer your question, my friend?
Yeah, I was more talking about all the tens of thousands of pictures that have people proof that those things are not recalled memories. They're actually like, I don't know. It's not a memory is basically my point. The residual of the factual pictures and things like that are introduced. The JFK one is a good one, but not necessarily what I was referring to. I just meant like the memory recall, the terminology of that is very misleading in terms of the effect. It's maybe the best way to explain it from a scientific point of view, but it's not. It definitely doesn't account for the residue.
Oh, okay. Oh, actually, I do have one more example, maybe that to help rectify what you're alluding to. There were a couple of participants that did have felt residual evidence also. Like there was one where I had a lady, she went to a wedding and thought like her mother said something, bad towards her, and it turns out it wasn't true. And she thought it was a big fight, and it turns out there wasn't, or something. And so, and the residual evidence was like other people in the event have pictures of them like having a good time and dancing, and she thought there was like some kind of major fight, and then like the aunt left, the people left and stuff, and it turns out it wasn't true. So that was like a personal residual evidence that one of the participants experienced that unique unto herself. That was fascinating.
All right, and I appreciate that, Charles, and I appreciate your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Lobaito!